We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. Right, wow. It's an exciting day. I'll start by just saying a few words about what we're going to do when Rigzen Shikpo comes. He was quite clear that this is not birthday celebration, it's long life. It's creating connections for his long life. So it's his 80th year, so it's really a very special time in our psychology, I think. Psychologically, 80 sounds very special, doesn't it? So because it sounds so special, it becomes special. It does feel like a landmark, doesn't it? You know. And next year I'll be 70. It feels like a real landmark. Yeah. I made it. Well, we'll see if I do.
Please live on.
So we were talking about connections yesterday and about how there are strange connections going on that we don't, they're manifesting mandalas that seem to be cutting across our idea of the material world altogether, so that you meet somebody in a way that you can't explain in terms of the material world. It's statistically impossible that it could have happened. I mean, almost impossible. And yet, from the pattern of our life, it just seemed it had to be, because that conditioned everything that happened afterwards. It was our whole life was affected by that, and you could see a whole build-up of connections that led to it. I know you all recognise this. It's called synchronicity. And from the point of view of the Buddhist tradition, that's brought about through our pranidhanas, what we've done and but mainly what we've intended and wanted to happen, and connections we've made and we've reinforced. So, obviously, what we really want to connect and reinforce and put our pranidhana power into is that the teachers stay in the world. And especially if we've got one actually in this world already, then all the conditions are really good. So let's just make it that bit, add to it. And it's a whole industry in among Tibetans. I mean, all these different monasteries, all praying really hard for their teachers to stay, and they've created amazing connections, and then they've spread out all over the world. So even on a material level, you can see, but actually, what really happens we can't really see, because it's really magical. It seems to us quite magical. So they have a particular way of bringing the right conditions together for the long life of the teacher, for the teacher's body to remain, the speech to spread the Dharma, and their heart and mind to remain connected to us in this world, and then for their qualities to augment, especially in this world, and their activity to augment, especially in this world. So there's something that symbolises each of those pranidhanas, if you like, that we're connecting to. So the one first of all, we make this mandala offering, which some of you are already familiar with, but there'll be a group of people making this offering of. It's actually the universe. It's like everything. So why leave anything out? It's everything. And so this is symbolised by grains of rice being heaped up in a nice structure called a mandala structure. And this is offered with lots of flowers in a very sort of ritualistic way. This is it. This is us offering everything. And then is everyone going to have anything in their hands?
I forgot to mention that, but one suggestion is that we all throw flowers towards the
Or
shrine.
bits of flour.
Or bits of flour. So you need to nip out to Tesco Express again for another 3 bunches.
Pull some flowers to pieces. It can be done with rice. It's a bit like at a wedding when you just, everybody throws But the idea is that it's your ritual expression that this is what's happening. I am actually giving. I'm making this connection through my gift. So it doesn't really, you could do it in your mind. That could be the way you make the connection. So then that we all offer, and then each person, there's people who will bring forward, and the image that's going to be offered is a very special image. It's a wrathful form of Guru Rinpoche riding a tigress, and she's very fierce. She's lactating, she's got cubs, so she's very protective. Yeah. And he's very protective, and he's got his kilaya, his 3-blade. It's not here. It's just over there, under the. Yeah, so he's holding his kilaya, his 3-bladed dagger, and he's holding his vajra, and he's the personification of anger. Yes, blazing flames all around him. Yeah. So this is a very important figure for Rizin Shikpo and for his Vajrayana students, this fierce form of Guru Rinpoche. And you think, well, what's that all about? I thought, anger was, the cause of samsara. But actually, it's misdirected anger that's the cause of samsara. Our anger is great, but it's just misdirected. It's directed towards what we can't actually destroy because it isn't in there. But it's like, this is the anger of, our anger creates karma and mandalas of confusion. Whereas this anger cuts through all confusion. It's the jnana that cuts through all confusion. It's like, enough, okay, enough, finish. I think it's a wonderful image, because the peaceful Buddha, of course, it's the same image. Complete peace. But this is like showing you that actually complete anger is actually complete peace if it's directed right. So I think it's a wonderful image. So that's the one we're going to offer him because we happen to know that he wants that. So, and then so he's called Dorji Drolop. So. Just so you ever run across that, I've got a connection with Dorji Drolop because we gave one to Rizin Shikpo for his long life. And then the speech we're giving, have you got both texts there? Both texts. Yeah, so we might as well give him both. Okay. So one of them is from the 7 Treasures of Longchenpa, which is completely dear to his heart. As you know, he calls his whole activities Longchenpa after Long, and it's... Chensi Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche taught him from the Longchen Nyingtik. So I thought it would be good to give him one of the treasures of Longchenpa. And another book called Vak, which is Sanskrit for speech, and this is the offering for speech, so it seemed very special. I might have given him that already, but never mind. It seemed very auspicious to give it. It's a very deep, it's actually Vedic, laying out the true essence, the esoteric essence of what sound is and what speech is, and it's it seemed like very appropriate to offer that. And then for his heart mind, it's a crystal ball, which is the standard one, which is symbolizing his bodhicitta, and everything is reflected in it, and yet it doesn't change. And in the same way, we're seeking for our heart and mind to become one with his heart and mind, which is this bodhicitta. So that's a very beautiful image for that, or symbol for that. Then the qualities is a vase full of all sorts of grains and jewels and precious things that Tara's nicely prepared. And I think the symbolism of that's obvious. It's all gathered in this place so that it can enrich this place, this time and us and this mandala. And then activity is a double vajra, which is on a piece of brocade. It's a double vajra. So that's the symbolism of that is the 5 Buddhas the creativity of the 5 Buddhas that are, you might know about the 5 jnanas, the 5 kinds of energy, same symbolism that's at the stupa. The Vajra energy, the Buddha energy, the Padma energy, the Ratna energy, and the Karma, yes. So this is, the double Vajra is very much a symbol for the Karma family as well. So, seems apt enough. It's really how that's going to manifest in this world as the activity to remove the sufferings of beings. So it's like, yes, may his activity flourish. And then, rather than giving his further offerings at that point, we'll invite him to give his talk. And then after his talk, we can offer him katas. We've got quite a lot of katas, and we might have to recycle some of them for the people at the end. So people who've got lots of katas at home. But we should have let people know, but never mind. So, and we've also I'm going to ask him to bless some photos of the image of Guru Rinpoche that's in the Hermitage, and that he will give them to you as you come up, as you're blessed by him. So I thought that would be really nice for everyone. At which case we will then have, when are we doing the thank yous? Before that?
I thought we would do the thank yous immediately after.
Yes, so immediately after we do the thank yous and make him his main offering from all of us, and then this blessing, and then the cake.
Anne Hollins.
Aha.
Yes,
Keep
yes.
the cake maker.
All right.
Well, has she actually won or not? There's competition still going on for chief. Keep the competition going. And then we're going to do the play. And I wanted to talk a bit about the play because it's very dear to his heart. He's very keen on this. So, why? This, I think it's really interesting. Drama is extremely interesting. It's so interesting how you can actually step into a mandala when you take on a role. And you step into that world. And it's amazing what comes out, without even thinking about it. Okay, I have to be a knight in shining armour. I can be a knight in shining armour. I take it on. I take on those qualities on the instant. And I might even look like it. And even if it's not done very professionally, it's surprising how quickly a person is what we say they are. I mean, children know that, don't they? The first thing they start doing, you're mum, I'm dad, or you're cowboys, I'm Indians, and off you go. So I think there's a lot to learn from that when you're thinking about the qualities we need as bodhisattvas, as qualities we need as a sangha. We can do that. We actually can. If we're clear about what it is we're going to do, we just hear it and off we go. So when we know the ethos of this sangha, we will embody it. We know how to do that. It's really so that doing the play in this fun way. Really, another thing that you notice is how quickly our perspective can be changed. How quickly we can step into other worlds. So although, because we've not had much time to make it, to polish it, it might be a bit chaotic. Well, it might go so smoothly you think we've, been rehearsing it for weeks. But nonetheless, it's very amazing how quickly the whole mandala it sort of appears. We step into it and create it in the instant. So I'm expecting this to be good fun. And basically, we're in this story. Tao has done an amazing job. I ordered it. I said, I want this. So she did it. Sort of, when she took a breath every now and then between everything else she was doing, she just created it. And bringing all those connections together. It's the connections of the Guru Rinpoche tradition and the stories associated with that, and how they actually connect us to the lineage. So the essence of the lineage, of course, is the Buddha's enlightened activity and our connection with that. And then these stories emerge, and some of them are quite bizarre. And yet, if you enter into those stories, there is a deep Dharma message in them, which is not always immediately obvious. You might notice this afternoon. But nonetheless, every time we encounter the story, something happens. We make a connection with it. So my thought is, even if it just seems to pass in a blur, nonetheless, you have made a connection with all these characters, and they're never going to be the same to you again. You're never going to hear the name, Tristan Detson or King Arthur without it triggering a sense of I'm connected to that. That's a living connection. So there's a legend of Guru Rinpoche. There's a legend of Britain. The legend of the places, the time, the whole image of our sense of how to embody what it is to be British. And then there's the King Arthur legend, which isn't just British, actually. It's spread. And so King Arthur represents something outside of actually the characters in the story of Britain. It starts to embody something that he has come to stand for, which is various themes. I tried to get out of Rizin Shikpa which particular themes he wanted to, he was inspired by. And he said, I'll think about that. And I was disappointed how he didn't come up with a whole lot immediately, but it remained rather vague. But he certainly mentioned the gathering of a group of knights who stood for these ideals of chivalry. And he certainly mentioned the Grail. And he could have mentioned other things, but those were the two that... And the sense of a quest. He mentioned that. So Tara ran with that. And, where she could find a connection between the Guru Rinpoche story and the Arthur story of the Grail, and particularly she noticed that Guru Rinpoche is holding a skull cup of Amrita, and very much like the Grail, same sort of symbolism and other things that she noticed. And then the other is the legend of the Awakened Heart Sangha, or the Longchen Foundation, or the lineage we belong to, which has this amazing figure at the heart of it. Well, the lineage, amazing lineage at the heart of it. You've got His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, the father of Trungpa Rinpoche, the father of all my gurus, actually. I mean, he is the great father figure of our, the generation of teachers that I learnt from. So he sort of stands out as the Guru Rinpoche figure in our life, in our story. And then there's, amazing Trungpa Rinpoche. And from that, everything that Rizin Shikpa received from him. And then there's Khenpo Rinpoche, who's actually still with us, so that's kind of, we're still in connection with him. So that, it's almost like you can see the Knights of the Round Table that we're descended from. And then His Holiness sending us to Wales, where we still are, and telling us to build a stupa, which is what we did. And actually, when we did this in the summer, the Sangha celebration, we were at the stupa with the relics of Khyentse Rinpoche actually there, and Trungpa Rinpoche there in the stupa. So it's kind of like, wow, this is our story. And I was talking to Dashu about this, and he came up with two things which I thought was really good. The two associations he had with the Arthurian story was the magic aspect, which is expressed through the story of Merlin, and he's a bit like the master passing on to his disciple Arthur, that sort of transmission thing. And then there's the values and the goodness of behind the chivalry side that Arthur represents, and Merlin represents this rather quixotic energy of it's going to do whatever it takes to get us enlightened. It might do things that we don't like or shock us, or like we don't know what it's going to do, but it's going to wake us up. So I thought that was really a nice association, and it reminded me of the book about the Longchen Nyingtik by Tulku Dundrup called Masters and Miracles of Tibet. Masters of Meditation and Miracles, isn't it? I thought, yeah, it's the same sort of sense. And then the goodness aspect of what chivalry is. And I was really struck with what Dasha was saying, what it suggested to him, this sense of dignity and respect and for other people's dignity, and the goodness associated with that, the sense of responsibility for the safety and well-being of others that's implied by that. I thought, yeah, those are our values. We are the knights of our sangha. Of course, and we've got this wonderful song, haven't we, that Khenpo Rinpoche gave us, the warrior. We're courageous and fearless, and we're going to carry on forever until the work's done. Until all beings are saved. So, yeah, I thought it felt really good. And then, and the values around the style in which you help others, which of course is what we're doing with our awakening dialogue and our mentoring training, and trying to learn how to communicate in a certain style, which has dignity to it, and has depth to it, and has meaning to it. And so I felt, yes, there's a lot there. So Tara's going to kind of let rip, get you all sort of tapping into your own, everyone's spontaneous creativity and ability to step into those roles, and then the rest of us just sit there and enjoy it.
We'll all be involved.
We'll all be involved. Yeah, fantastic. That's the spirit. So, yes, the place. So hopefully Rizin Shikpo will, be able to be up for, because apparently he might be a bit tired, but I think he'll stay for that. And then hopefully he'll also stay for supper. And we've got all sorts of things lined up, sort of talent. And I think who's the MC? Dayden's the MC. So, and it might work over supper for us to have, before each course, some entertainment as we go. So you need to have an eye out for silence. Okay, there's something going to happen. So, and then. It might work like that. We'll have to see. Or it might be just so spontaneous we don't know what's going to happen next. Okay, so now to the questions. And I really had fun with this question that I said I'm going to come back to about the table. Do you remember? It's a very profound question, very profound. I mean, it says table, but actually you're talking about the whole of what we call the objective world, aren't you, really? So like what? The non-sentient world as we think of it. So the question was, it seems to be that everything can be other, or the other, and myself can be the other to others. So as I'm as other, as a table. But can everything be self? Can a table be self? So I thought, okay, let's pick this up and look at it. And you remember yesterday I was saying there's this triangle that happens where you've got nirvana as the ultimate, and then you've got samsara nirvana, where they're kind of dependent terms. And so in that case, when they say, well, there is no samsara nirvana, that's actually nirvana. Yeah. So the same term is being used, same with prajnaparamita, same with emptiness. And I was looking at this pattern and thinking, and it's the same with self and other. It's the same with God, creator and creation, you know. It's the same with intelligence, knower and known. It's the same pattern. So you've got self, which is the totality of what is. And then there's this movement towards manifestation, and that's where the mandala begins to emanate. The mandala structure emanates in an instant. You've got self and other. So then you've got self again. You've got a contrast between self and other, whereas actually there can't be because it's totality. But in manifestation, it manifests as self and other. But since they're both grounded in the first principle, it's an appearance of separateness, but it's not separate. But you can draw it in a drawing as separate. And then you've got the self and other relating to each other. And then I was thinking, you could also have the same triangle with totality, and then totality in particular. So, in a way, the self is the totality, and the world is the particular, or the particulars. And we can be both the totality and we can be the particular, so that for another person, their totality perceives us as a particular. We're integral to totality, but we're highlighted as a particular that you can focus on. So I can focus on another person, and I think, well, they're other, in order for them to be a particular that I can focus on and relate to in an intelligent way. You don't want to be seen as a generality all the time, do you? To get your message across, you have to be seen as particular. So I thought that was quite helpful. And then I was looking at the idea of, to each other, obviously we're playing back and forth because we're equivalent. I'm particular to you, you're particular to me, you're other to me, I'm other to you. So that works, and the self is always there. But then when it comes to a table, I thought it doesn't quite work the same way, because the table is other to both tables and the self. But it's also intrinsic to reality. So if you go back to your first diagram, the table is actually intrinsic to self. It never is separate from self. But the way it expresses itself when it's manifesting is only as other. But the implication, if it only manifests as other, but when you look into what it is, it's a manifestation of self. And in fact, it can't be known, it can't be manifested if there isn't an equivalent self knowing it. And it gets back to that question, is the tree in the quad. Who was that? Bishop Berkeley, yes. So they're dealing with this same question. Is the tree still there if there's no one in the quad? And then I think a voice from God comes down saying, yes, it's still there because God's there. Yeah, it's the same issue, isn't it? Same thing. You could even use it with, sometimes I try it with intelligence. If you think of the universe and totality as intelligence, then when it manifests, you've got intelligence and something, a knower, the intelligence, but also the known, which seems to be different. But actually the known is never different from the fundamental intelligence. So then actually there's only intelligence. So the universe is only intelligence. There isn't anything other than intelligence, which to me is very, I think that has to be true. You know, when you look at, you know, the universe and the evolution, and you look, there's something so akin to intelligence. And Wiggsenshipa often says, you know, there isn't anything other than beings, in the sense there isn't anything other than intelligence in this, you know, ultimate sense. But it just appears to us, once you get manifestation, there has to be this play between knower and known, self and other, for that to happen. And therefore we get the impression there's such a thing as non-intelligence or non-sentient or separate reality. And this is such a shift in the way we think. I think just to take that on board and to go away and think about it in all different contexts in your experience, I think it kind of starts to point to something simple. You know, it sounds a bit intellectual like this, but I think it could be something that helped you to get the simplicity of what we're talking about here. So thank you for that question. An age-old question. And yes, a lot of mileage yet in it, I think. Next question. What am I doing? What is the boundary, do you think? And then some suggestions. Is it an energy? Is it a space? Is it an encounter? And I thought, is it a structure? Like a mathematical entity is a structure. It's relationships that define a structure. And that structure, you know, we might draw it with, you know, lines and points, but that isn't what it is. So I think something like that. And the thing is about this structure is it's ungraspable. So the lines and the points and the diagrams and the ideas are never going to capture it, but could point to it. And in some sense also I think it's unchanging. It might be flexible, but it doesn't change. So you could say that the boundary of our personal mandala, I suspect, just never changes. Because the question that went on from that was, do we have a boundary each, or is it created each time we encounter the other, or does it have a different nature or flavour each time? And I think that what it's pointing to here is that in order for anything to manifest, there has to be, if you like, two. And that's tremendously mysterious. I mean, I had this conversation with probably one of the last, not the last, but towards the end of the conversations I've had with Rinpoche, Khenpo Rinpoche, since he's been ill. And he was sitting there and he was saying, what is two? And I said, do you know, Rinpoche, this is what mathematicians consider. You know, it's very deep. You know, what is two? Like if one is totality, the whole, one, what is two? How can it get outside of totality and be another one? It's like, and when I told him this, I said, they've got a whole language for talking about this kind of thing called mathematics. And he said, really? That's really important. You must use that for Dharma. You know, he got very fired up by this, and apparently he went off and gave a talk about it. So it's, you know, that movement of two-ness, whatever that is where the creativity is possible, and where the play of self and other can produce the stories, and the qualities can manifest because this two-ness, which is, what is that? What is the if you take 2 points, they're distinct, but neither of them has any dimensions. So what's the boundary between them? If there's no boundary between them, how are they 2 points? And these in a way, these are meditation questions. When you're resting in meditation and you notice how you spin off the assumptions around two. And then if you come right back, drop the assumptions, and think, there's still manifestation, and then you're starting to meditate. Because you're actually not, you're defeating, it's like the koan, it's defeating your conceptual mind. Your conceptual mind keeps wanting to make it into something, but anything you make it into is not it. And yet it doesn't go away. The problem doesn't go away because you can't understand it. You still handle two all the time. You can't understand it, but you can handle it. So what's going on? So that it's really only through coming back to the simplicity of that in the meditative environment, that frame of mind where you're actually just letting go, opening and letting go. It doesn't go away. The problem doesn't go away. Eventually you realise, because I'm trying to solve it by interpreting it. But before I tried to interpret it, I knew it. I can handle two. But what am I actually doing? What is the creativity of two, if you like? So, very nice question, thank you. Yes?
But is belief got anything to do with the manifestation of?
It's an interesting question. It comes in so fast. So, for manifestation, there has to be some sense of this two, whatever that is. But our habit is to believe in two. So we interpret it as two, and we think we know what two is, it's separate. And then we start to take one side or the other and create a mandala out of that, actually. The mandala, in a way, that whole confused mandala appears as we grasp at that. It's all of a piece, actually. It's not in time, actually. It's all of a piece. It just, we've created it and we enter it. And we believe in it. And that's what makes it stuck. That's how we get stuck. Because we then believe. And we can't see our way out of it because we're trying to use the conceptual mind. And we can't, it'll keep coming back to itself all the time. And the only way we will get out of it is dropping the conceptual mind and back to before we created it, which has the potential to create not only stuck worlds, but actually pure realms. That creativity of worlds is not a negative thing, it's a wonder. And we celebrate creativity, don't we? Because we recognise it's a wonder. But, then how best to use that to take us to the freedom of true creativity, really, where you can play endlessly without it becoming a problem. I don't know if that answers you.
Is it like the simplicity of binary? It's either on or off, manifesting or not manifesting. Either focusing or refocusing, but it's all the same. Is that
Yes, it's a play within the nature of reality that isn't a problem in itself. No, that's right. It isn't a problem. But then we make it a problem.
But do you think the two-ness, what we think of as two, is close to what we've come up as a binary system?
Well, I'll leave you to keep working on that. Yeah, obviously everything that manifests will be involved in it. Yeah, so
That's very simple.
but yeah, no, I mean, I'm not going to jump at an answer to that, but maybe we can talk about it more. Yeah, I'm sure there's mileage in what you're saying.
Could that be it? But sometimes it says something tense, and then I'll look at the tingly in my feet, and there's no separation there, but I'm creating two, and I'm playing with that idea of not just that there's no past, future, time concept, but that it's almost like there's another and self, but it's actually in the same place, so therefore this isn't any different to that. Is that something about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this is relevant. Yeah.
It's like you could be other to recreate it,
But-
like what's other to me, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'll find all of that's pointing in the same direction. So, work with it. Yeah. You know, I'm not going to be able to give a definitive answer because it depends what anyone's meaning at the time, what they're saying, because it can't really be said. But you know, we might make a sort of jump together, but it's too complicated to do that with an individual at the moment. Yeah. But yeah, no, great, good questions. Since our body, for example, can seem to be self sometimes and other sometimes, as when a pain afflicts us, we cannot trust our interpretation of experience. How can we distinguish in our experience between self and other? Very interesting question. I thought about that a bit as well. What do you think about it? Yeah, I was thinking about pain, what we mean by pain. Like how much of it is, you know, obviously it isn't there all the time, so it's been stimulated by something. And it's a body response, and it's a sense impression, something has stimulated this and then we've interpreted it. So by the time it's pain, it's an interpretation, but it's an interpretation of what? It's a really interesting question, isn't it? A lot of that interpretation is something that's self, because it's peculiar to ourself. But on the other hand, that isn't, it's happening to us, so in that sense it's other. And I remember Rigzenschick for quite a few years ago, he was talking to us about this and saying that as you look at this more and more, you realise a lot of what you thought was self is other, and what you thought was other is self. So I think, you know, it's a really good question, and around pain in particular, around dukkha in particular, you know, like, which is the key to the whole path, isn't it? What's going on? And of course, what's going on is because we think in this, we're attached to self and other separate, where when you reach this very difficult area of what's self and what's other, we get particularly confused, and we're particularly apt to grasp more strongly onto our assumption of otherness, you know, separateness. And it's quite really difficult to unpick. But it's, you know, that's really the what do you say, the rock face where we need to be working. What is happening there? How quickly the interpretation comes in. And then if there isn't an interpretation, what is it? What is it? What is the actual essence of what's happening? Is it self? Is it other? Or can it only be understood at that next level of the hierarchy? Can it only be understood when it's, you know, you could say it's dukkha at the top, you know, the First Noble Truth, and then there's dukkha and non-dukkha, you know, pleasure and pain, or there's both of them come from the same source, which if you call it pain, it sounds awful, but it's just a name for the, you know, what is the unified totality. So yes, it's it's a unified totality of everything, and you're calling it pain, and actually it's bodhicitta. you might well call it pain. It's ultimately sensitive. As I'm saying this, I'm remembering one of Riggs and Shikfa's favourite books by Lindsay. What's his name? Something Lindsay. The Voyage to Arcturus. And there's this character all the way through the book and it ends up that this Crag, his name is, isn't it? And Pauli Trungpa Rinpoche thought this was written by an Ati practitioner. And this character actually turns out to be Pain. His other name is Pain. And it's the pain that got him to enlightenment, and it's pain where he ended up. He identified with pain, which it's very profound. I didn't get it at all. I read it. I thought it was a miserable book. Very interesting. Very interesting. So lot of mileage in that. Again, where am I going? Here we are. In the centre of dotted boundaries, what does complete faith by the student in the Lama do and result in? Dotted, porous, does it? Porous boundaries? Not quite sure I get dotted. Anybody want to expand on dotted? Never mind. I'll see. I can see if I can manage without it. Does complete faith, underlined by the student in the Lama, do? So I guess this is really talking about the boundary in the way I really love to talk about it. So given everything is, the totality of self and all that, and then you've got this play between self and other, then the boundary is the sensitivity, and this word I like, which I love, this word intimacy. The boundary is the intimacy, so that when I open my heart to the Guru, to the lineage, to the Dharma, it's like, it's not just that I disappear, but I'm experiencing that something entering and touching me. And of course the words are inadequate, but I think when I use those words, I think it takes you all somewhere. It's where I started yesterday, isn't it? So as you recognize that the importance of the boundary, the all-pervasiveness of the boundary, and that it's always got this quality of intimacy about it, you start to recognize, actually, that's it. That's how the blessing of the lineage, how the power of the Buddhas, all the power in the universe that's working to liberate me, that's how it will liberate me. In a sense, by my sensing it. And then the effect of that's so immediate. You say, why don't I just stay there? I don't know. I don't know why I don't just stay there. It's getting better as I get older, but it's taking decades. And this is what, this is the prayer of all the great yogins, is may that, call that faith if you like, become completely spontaneous and effortless without any conceptuality whatsoever. And that's it, that's the goal of the path. May non-conceptual devotion arise in me. I mean, it's a bit clunky in English when you say it like that, isn't it? May non-conceptual devotion arise in me, but This is the prayer, you know, the yogin's prayer, but it could be all our prayer, couldn't it? May it become completely effortless, spontaneous, natural. There's nothing else, that's it, the simplicity of my being, completely pervaded by that intimacy with the power of awakening. How do we keep forgetting that? There you go. Is there a difference between the ego... Oh, what are we doing for time? Oh, well, let me see. I've got to be selective. What happened when Lama Shenpen was talking this morning? Beyond the words. Good. Is there a difference between the ego and personal mandalas with regard to whether or not connections between self and other can be broken? Interesting question. Something change valence from good to bad. Is it a desire to change towards a more positive connection? Is a desire to change towards a more positive connection an ego project? I scribbled this. There's a lot in that question, but wanting the connection and wanting clarity and wanting that connection to be good is completely natural to the personal mandala, because the personal mandala includes everything. So it's completely against its nature for there not to be good connections. But then what often happens is that is driving us, but it gets focused into a particular strategy. I want this person to be and do and become or whatever. What I can invent in my own imagination of how they should be or it should be. And then I start, busily trying to make it happen. And that's when it doesn't really work. And it becomes an ego project. So the driving force behind it is natural to the personal mandala and should be celebrated. And then that should be turned into a pranidhana to kind of overcome any particular negative spin, ways of thinking that might be getting in the way. And then you just have to really sort of feel situations as they open up without too much of an agenda. Kind of, like what's going to be possible given all the circumstances. You know where you're coming from and you're feeling as best you can, and from there, any opportunities that is there will be able to, express itself. There you are. I know the answer. Why don't I do it? Oh, well, I'm working on it. We're all working on it, aren't we? So I'm going to have to finish there because it's 1:15. So, I've only got one that I haven't done. What is it? Can you say something more about the insight that can arise out of meeting and atomizing and implicit assumptions and how this might relate to karma? Gosh, it's a big one. I'm not going to be able to do it. I've just put a quick note that, quoting from the prayer we do in the morning, that the sword of wisdom cuts the shoots of suffering at their root, and that connections remain the same, but karmic results are no longer harmful when we cut the root of suffering. When we cut the shoots of suffering at the root, the connections remain, but they're no longer harmful. So that it's like your karma can be cut in that way through insight. But I'm running a bit late. There's a whole question of karma coming up there. Anyway, I'll think about it some more, and maybe I might actually get round to putting it on Buddhism Connect. So thank you very much, everybody. I enjoyed your questions extremely much. Thank you. Okay, we dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the hearts